day. We will just go ahead and get started and jump right into the agenda. So I want to thank Amy Sassano and McCall Flynn in the governor's office, whoever else is joining Amy, for talking about the status of the coronavirus relief funds. So Amy, I will turn it over to you. Is there anything you want us to pull up on the screen?
No.
Thanks, Amy.
So my video is really awful, but I'm Amy Sassano. I'm the Deputy Budget Director in the Governor's Budget Office. I'm not 100% sure exactly what you're asking me to discuss, and so I'm just going to talk a little bit in general about the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and then a little bit in specific about the allocation that's been made for K-12 schools. And so the Coronavirus Relief Fund is a pot of $1.25 billion that was allocated to the state of Montana to be used to address coronavirus relief-related expenses. There is some federal guidance and about a 12-page FAQ that guide what the funds can be used for. The governor at this time has allocated a little over $800 million of the $1.25 billion to various needs across the state. If I can get my spreadsheet to work on my own computer, a little over $200 million has been allocated to business assistance to impacted businesses. The biggest chunk of that that you may be able to relay to businesses in your areas is $125 million that's been allocated for loan deferment for debt that local businesses may incur. We have $80 million that has been allocated to business stabilization grants, which are up to $10,000 grants to help local businesses, small businesses with less than 50 employees, weather the storm of COVID-19. There's over close to $150 million that's been allocated to what I would call social service programs. The biggest chunk of that is for housing stabilization for Montanans who are unable to pay their rent or their mortgage payments. The next largest chunk is to behavioral health providers, which I think is particularly relevant to K-12 schools, that those behavioral health and mental health providers are able to stay in business as they have issues with COVID-19, but my own personal issue that they're very critical to the success of schools is addressing kids' mental health needs. There's also money that's been allocated to reimburse local governments for their expenses that they've incurred, county health departments and places like that in addressing the virus. And then the $75 million that has been allocated to K-12 schools. And I think everyone has received kind of a little one-page document that was distributed by McCall, kind of giving the purpose of the money and the eligible uses and how schools certify that they will use the funds in accordance with the CARES Act. As of last night, I haven't looked this morning, we had about 115 schools and school districts that had submitted their documentation. I will use this forum as a little plug for please be careful when you're filling out your grants. We've had a handful of people who have submitted their applications and have had their personal name as the applicant rather than the name of the school. So just, I've been sending those back, but please keep an eye on those as you're submitting your application. We plan on having the first payment go out August 7th, and then the second payment would go out August 21st, and that would be the entirety of the $75 million. the requirement is that the money be expended in accordance with the requirements of the CARES Act, which is anything that is COVID related. We were thinking particularly about the more obvious ones of disinfection and disinfecting supplies, if the schools will be providing masks to students, if there are some minor renovations that need to be made, installing plexiglass or things like that around a teacher's desk, or whatever it is that each school has developed in their plans to open. As long as the expense can be justified as COVID related, there shouldn't be an issue, although we need to keep in mind that these funds need to be expended by December 30th, 2020. And so major renovations or things like that, where those funds couldn't be expended by that time, might be better paid for perhaps with the other funds that OPI is distributing to schools. But the letter that was distributed by McCall has a pretty extensive list of what expenses could be used. I think technology is another big area where schools may have a need. But I think, as you all know, every school is going to be different in exactly what they need to do to address their students and families and needs in that area. And so we're trying to be as flexible as possible in what those dollars can be used for, while still complying with the federal guidance and the federal FAQ. So that's, I guess, the short and sweet overall coronavirus relief fund and the money that's been allocated to K-12 schools through this specific pot of money. It seems fairly clear that the next round of federal funding, which I believe is now called the HEALS Act, will have additional funding for schools, and we'll have to keep our eye on how all of these different pots of money coordinate and what their dates are and how they can work together to not duplicate expenses.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. McCall, do you have anything to add before we go into questions?
I don't. I was going to expand a little bit on the PPE, but Burke is on, so I'll let him do that. Just a reminder, this PPE was, the governor had asked DES to, purchase some bulk PPE for schools that would go out separate from the 75 million that was allocated. But Amy, you nailed it. Thanks.
Thanks, McCall, and we do appreciate Burke being on. Burke, before we turn it over to you real quick, Ken or Superintendent, do you have any clarifying questions? I know that we sent in some requests around this one pager.
Thank you very much, Dylan. And Amy, good to see you. I'm wishing you all the best, and thank you for participating today in the call, and Burke as well. It's always nice to have the governor's office interact. Some question had come up on the uses, and I know you alluded to them as being possibly parallel to the uses that we had with our CARES dollars. Is there a document that we could share with our advocates or any other school that wants to know what these allowable uses could be?
Amy, this is McCall. Superintendent, I've sent that over to Dylan already. Our education advocates all also have that. So your office does have that list. And I sent it to Christy when she asked if we wanted to include anything in this meeting.
Thank you, McCall. We just have not heard anything specifically as the questions that we have. So will we be directing the questions then to McCall or to you, Amy, regarding the deployment of these dollars? Who would you like that to go to? I'm assuming McCall or, okay.
Yeah, McCall would be the first contact.
We can do that. We can do that. That would be great. Thank you. And it's good to have Burke on the phone that's going to share with us some discussion on the PPE rollout.
First, Ken, do you have anything to add before we move on?
Thank you, Dylan.
Thanks, Dylan. And McCall, I think the request is still out there, and I know you guys are working hard on it, of the specifics of the $10 million for pupil transportation. If you have anything to update there, I'd appreciate it.
Ken, I don't have any updates for you. I do know that that's something that we're still working through. And we'll, you guys will know as soon as we have more information. So I'll be sure to share that.
Thank you.
Nancy's on the call. I don't know if she has anything to add on that one. Nancy?
I just got here, and so I've missed the conversation. I was busy trying to get the application, the checkbox is ready to go, so I'm behind the scenes.
Thanks, Nancy. That's all right. We can just follow up with you afterwards. But Burke, we appreciate you being on the phone to talk about the PPE coming into schools.
All right. Thanks, Dylan. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me join here and putting me on short notice here. So a couple of things, as McCall kind of mentioned, is we had been tasked as part of our orders as we were doing large bulk orders for some of the medical PPE supplies, is to look at also ordering additional PPE and different bulk purchases for the schools. And some of those items, just to kind of give you a quick rundown of what they are, we looked at disposable masks, and we were able to purchase about 1.2 million disposable masks, and then additional about, I think, 400,000 youth-sized disposable masks. So for more of the smaller elementary school age kids. We also did, in looking at face shields for individuals that may not be able to wear a mask due to medical conditions, and ability to have some of those available. Gloves for either temperature checkers to augment school nurses, because we do know that some of these things are hard to come by and they may be on order and may be pushed out a couple months. So there'll be some gloves that would be going out. And then the two big orders would be hand sanitizer and then also disinfectant wipes. So we looked at purchasing about 12,000 gallons of disinfectant wipe, and they'd be in different size containers. You could use them whether in the classroom or in more common areas. All of them will come with pumps. And then the wipes would be just a container of, it's a company that's creating these disinfectant wipes now, and they're kind of similar to like Clorox wipes that are being provided out there. Some of this material we already have on hand because we ordered it as a big bulk purchase with other medical supplies. So we were, and I've talked to Tracy this morning real quick about some of this and kind of working with her to look at all the different school districts out there and kind of verify what we see as the number of students as well as kind of faculty and staff. And then we would do an allocation out to each of the school districts based on what we have. We have some information that we used from this past spring where we were working with them to send out some of the cloth masks that we had received as well. Because we did send out about just under, I think about 300,000 to schools through the different counties of cloth masks. I believe back in May-June timeframe as we were trying to get them out for some of that in that time frame. We are looking right now to probably start sending working with some of the different school districts to start sending out this material that we have on hand, which would include the thermometers, disposable face masks, and adult shields, the face shields and gloves. The hand sanitizer and wipes are still on order, and we're hoping to start seeing them within the next 3 weeks or so, with about a 4-week total time to get all of them in. And that's kind of where we're at with our purchasing and ability. So I guess if there's any questions for us, I'd be willing to answer that. And we do want to make sure we're coordinating with the different school districts. so that it doesn't just show up on their doorstep and all of a sudden have a bunch of stuff. So we'll make sure we do coordinate with those folks.
Thanks, Burke. When can schools expect to start receiving these?
So we're hoping if we get everything together, some of the schools may be starting to see some stuff next week with some of this material. It does take us a little bit to make sure we have all the trucks lined up and get things broken down. We're trying to work on the breakdown this week and then also contacting folks to let them know what it is that's going to be there and when they'll be expecting to show up. But we are hoping to start shipping some of this stuff out, especially some of the larger orders or not orders, but kind of pushes to like our AA and A school districts, larger population areas, because that's a lot of the different material that we have on hand, and we're starting to fill up warehouse spaces as well. So,
okay, Tracy, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Dylan. I'll be working with Burke and our procurement staff to figure out some of the logistics around warehousing. As Burke said, they're running low on spaces to store all of this and get it staged and shipped out. So we're working on those logistics. And we'll be looking over the spreadsheet that Burke sent to look at numbers within school districts and make sure that that looks good. And anything, Burke, that we can do to help, just please feel free to let us know.
So if we get calls from district superintendents or principals just wanting updates, or if they have questions about how it's going to work, should we point them towards you, Burke?
Yeah, you can send them towards me. We can do that, and I'll also work with Tracy. We're going to try and send out some, put together kind of a little, some bullet points to hopefully be able to send out to them, let them know kind of where we're at, what kind of they can expect for that as well. So,
thank you. We really appreciate that. Are there any other questions or comments for Burke from anyone else? All right. Well, schools will be happy to know that that's coming. I know just in my talks with Mass regions, the superintendent regions, they're in the process of looking for a lot of that PPE right now. So next we have Cheryl and Tim talking about Board of Public Education updates. And I don't know if Pete is on. It looks like Pete is on as well. So I'll turn it over to Tim first.
Thank you, Dylan, and pleasure to be here and share this time with everybody. Just as kind of a little context leading into what this topic is we're going to talk about here, and that is that we were tasked at the last July Board of Public Ed meeting with identifying the highest priorities for schools that we can provide flexibilities for schools in this fall. And coming out of that, we came up with two high priority items that we'd like to address with the Board of Public Ed through subcommittee work. And one of them is in licensure and the other one is in accreditation. I'm going to talk about licensure, and myself and Jay Phillips will also have some comments on the finances. So real briefly, licensure as it relates to this fall is surrounding renewals and encouraging and getting as many renewed licenses as possible before the school year starts, and then of course through the fall as well. But looking at the data on here, we have approximately 500 licenses that are renewed from July 1 through December 2nd. We have approximately 100 or so licenses that are renewed between September 1st and December 2nd. And what we know is that by December 2nd, there are about 1,600 licenses that are left on the table. So we want to increase that number of renewals as best we can with whatever opportunity and flexibility to get more teachers to renew their licenses. We also know that teachers don't renew licenses for a lot of reasons: retirement, changing professions, and things like that. So we just want to make as an attractive environment as we can. And so the proposal that we're going to bring to the subcommittee is to waive the August 31st renewal through September 30th. So it's another 30 days of renewal opportunity for staff. And so we're just trying to create the most inviting environment for that to happen. Jay, I think he's going to talk a little bit about the finances of this, but we do want to preserve any funding that the Board of Public Ed and SISPEC receive. We want to make sure that that's neutral. But our ultimate goal is to get as many licensed teachers into the classrooms in Montana as possible.
Thanks, Tim. I think we'll just have Cheryl give her update before we go to questions or comments. Cheryl, you're still muted.
Let's try this again. Thank you, Dylan. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you here on this beautiful Montana morning. And before you is the draft of our best thinking of today. And as we all know, in this context of adaptive change, our best thinking of today can quickly change by tomorrow. We were asked by the Board of Public Ed to identify those urgent critical items that need to be in front of districts as they get ready to start the school year. And as shared before, was maintaining the accreditation status of school districts from the 1920 school year for the 2021. We've incorporated feedback that we received from our education partners about ensuring that districts have the flexibility that if they can resolve accreditation violations from 2020 in time for 2021, by all means allow for that to happen, and including an improvement in accreditation status. We've also identified 1055-606 subsection 5 as the potential arm that may need to be suspended as we look at accreditation. The board subcommittee is working to find that date and time that will work for us to be able to present our recommendations to them, and we look forward to that occurring fairly quickly. Like to just remind everybody that the context in which our districts are operating today is a continual adaptation to change in an environment in where crisis and emergency has become the flavors of the day. None of us can predict what life will be like next week, much less in October or November or January. So when the OPI continues to look at regulatory burdens placed on districts, those burdens were identified, or those regulations were identified pre-COVID, and it behooves all of us to ask the question, does that same lens apply today? Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Want to give Pete a chance to jump in too before any other questions or comments.
Well, thanks, Dylan. Yeah, this is Pete. This is the first time I've seen these, so I know that there'll be, that Cheryl's been working with Chris in our office to set up the committee meetings, and so the committees will be looking at what's brought forward. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Pete. I think that they were sent over just a little bit ago, but if not, you'll have them here shortly. So I guess Jay has a document too on licensure that he's going to share. So go ahead, Jay.
Morning, everybody. So real quick, let me get my screen up here. And so I was asked to put together a little bit of the financial information related to the Board of Public Education's funding that comes from the license fees. So what I have here is just to give you a little quick history of how the revenues flow into the two funds. For every one of the different types of licenses, there's the new license where we charge $36, which is a 5-year license plus a $6 admin fee. Then the renewal of a license is $30. And then teachers can also apply for a Class 5 provisional, and then also they can request a duplicate as well. When the revenues come into OPI, we actually do a split per statute. 67% of the revenues go to the advisory council, and 33% of those revenues go into the research fund. And so what I put together here, because the question on hand here is what would be the impact in the event that the licenses revenues were extended out, or I guess temporarily delayed for 1 month. And so I put together here the 2 different funds as they're broken out by fiscal year. Got you a little history from 18 to 20, and then also as of the 24th, the current revenues that came in for July. Part of it what I'm going to focus on is that you can see that overall in the revenues themselves, there's not a huge difference. There's probably about a $4,000 difference between the fiscal years of 19 and 20. But what we wanted to look at was also what was the potential impact on COVID, which is these green highlights here in the boxes. And then there you can see there are some minor differences where we did not process as much and we didn't receive as much revenues. But again, it's nothing that is extremely material that would adversely impact the fund itself. So in that, in fiscal year 21 right now, we're at about 52% of the revenues that we had last year. So there's still a little bit of work in order to get the revenues and the applications processed through there so we can get to where we were last year. So in comparison, as to activity for expenditures, you know, the research fund in itself, you can see there's been quite a bit of activity in the prior years in 18 and 19. 20 was a little bit lighter in the first part of the year. And the current year in 21 of July, there's $1,700 worth of activity in there. The months that we would be looking at that would be potentially, if there was less revenues, would it impact the research fund itself? You can see there's, again, kind of minor actual expenditures that have incurred in there during those months. Most of the expenditures that are in here are related to travel and also for legal fees for various purposes that the organization does. The advisory council, kind of same things. You can see in that month or months that we're talking about potentially not having as many revenues coming in as collected. There's still minimal activity from 19 even into 20. And as of July, there's only been 1,874. So if you do a comparative of what we've received to date up here in the blue versus what you see down in the orange, you can see that there's sufficient revenues coming into, I'm sorry, in the first year of 21, sufficient revenues coming in to cover the expenses that we have currently. And within that fund, there also is a little bit of a cash reserve that we have after fiscal year end. And I can't tell you the exact amount of that right now because the books are actually closing today. But that's a number that we can look at for further analysis as we go. History of where we are typically when we're actually processing. If we'll go over here to the license renewed by history, you can see in the years that we've had a pretty consistent. This year, again, we're not really that far down. We're probably about, looks like 91 applications different. So just a little under 4% from the prior year. The activity that comes into the actual funds, we have about 69% of the activity comes in. The licenses are from renewals. Renewals are a good revenue stream because they actually don't have to be processed the same as a new application because they don't have to submit as many documentations to support it. So as those are entered into our system, they're actually batched every night and the licenses are issued almost immediately the next day. Where you will have a little bit hang up and part of the slowness of this year in our revenues, you know, due to COVID, we actually did have staff that was out for, you know, substantial time. You know, we had one employee out that was out for 105 hours, 2 others, ones including a temp that were out for 32 hours that utilized the COVID time. And then like any agency, trying to make the transition from working in the office to remotely, it takes a little bit of time to get that set up and so that we can make it efficient. And so part of that, again, is going to be what kind of caused a little bit of the revenue shortfall in itself. As Tim kind of talked about too, there's also an outstanding license renewal history. It's interesting that at this point, July 1st this year, we actually had more teachers that applied for licenses than in prior years. And so that's a good thing. That means they're out there and they're trying to be diligent even during the COVID crisis. And one of the key dates, you know, is December 2nd. You know, if we did have a lot of teachers out there, and Tim had said that many of them will not renew because they've retired or they've switched professions. But we always have kind of quite a few out there that actually haven't submitted and had their license renewed. December 2nd is a key date because if teachers' licenses aren't renewed, then there's risk that the state quality educator payment that the district receives will actually be reduced because of that. So it's pretty high level. I'll open it up for questions if anybody has questions about any of that.
Thanks, Jay. Any questions on
Dylan?
anything that was just presented?
Dylan?
Yeah.
This is Nancy, and I'd like to just say that both of these funds, both the research fund and the advisory fund, are the Board of Public Ed's, 45% of the Board of Public Ed's budget. And so if these dollars go away, they are spent as the cash comes in. They can't be spent before the cash comes in. And they are budgeted to spend that to pay for both CISPAC and the travel for the board and so forth. So that's what those expenditures are. And it would be pretty devastating to the Board of Public Ed to lose that funding.
Yeah, Nancy, you're correct. Like, again, if you kind of look at it, the research that's just packed is they've got all their travel. Again, that's kind of what happens there. And then the majority of, like you said, their staff and whatnot, their personal services, looks like they historically kind of start charging the majority of that, like starting February.
That's primarily because there's no cash in the fund until February. Really, spring is when you do most of your teacher certification licensing, and they can't spend the money until it's there.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on that? Any other questions or comments for Tim, Cheryl, or Jay? All right, thank you, Jay. I don't see Kirk on the line, but the next agenda item is regarding school reopening plans. And I talked with Kirk a little bit last week. We've seen in the news and on social media a lot of school reopening plans pop up. And I was wondering if there would be any value in us trying to informally collect those, kind of like we did with the school closing plans in the fall, where Dennis just kind of put together a spreadsheet of what each school was doing. Obviously don't want to put an extra formal reporting requirement on schools. So we didn't want to duplicate efforts. Kirk hadn't planned on collecting anything, although he was kind of thinking the same thing we were, which is, what kind of value could we get from those? Are any of the other groups on here? And it looks like I see Emily, I see Marco. Have you heard, or do you know if any entities are collecting these reopening plans, just so we don't make duplicative asks? Or McCall, I guess, same question to you.
Not that I know of, Dylan. This is Marco.
This is McCall. We're not asking for plans at this time.
Okay.
Same here. We haven't been collecting that.
Okay. Well, we'll keep you all in the loop, and I'll just kind of keep working with Kirk on this because it's kind of his domain primarily. And then we did, just start seeing some initial language from the agreement that was made between the White House and the Senate majority on the HEALS Act, the next round of COVID funding. There is some initial language in that would require some state reporting of plans. So I've been in touch with our senators' offices about what that would look like, but that just popped up on the radar yesterday. So this will kind of be an ongoing conversation. Anything else on school reopening plans?
Dylan, what does that state reporting do if you don't mind sharing? I guess, what does it ask for and who has to do the report?
That is still being worked out in the initial drafts. It looks like the state would have to collect reopening plans from schools just to ensure that full educational services are being offered before funding would be released. It looks like right now the language would actually have it go through your office.
Okay, and is it contingent on reopening? The additional funding, do you know?
So that's the draft I'm looking at right now is about 112 pages long, and that's
I saw that too.
That's not even the full bill. It sounds like not fully reopening brick and mortar, but fully offering education services is kind of what it looks like at this point, with the availability of some in-person learning, whatever that in-person learning looks like.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yep. But like I said, that's new on the radar. We can stay in touch on that, McCall. Any other questions or comments about that? All right. Well, our last agenda item, which is relatively new under other business here, is I want to thank Mark Beckman with the Montana High School Sports Association for joining us this morning to share the exciting and anticipated news that we all got yesterday on the fall sports guidance. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Superintendent, for asking me to be a part of this, and good morning, everyone. We released our return to fall activities plans yesterday. They're on our website. Also, I thank Alex and John over at the Department of Health and Human Services. They have put those on with some frequently asked questions on their COVID-19 page. Superintendent and Dylan are going to put it on the OPI page, and I know Kirk Miller also has contacted me and said he's going to throw those on the SAM page. So they're out there. There's a lot of information there. It's a very detailed plan. Our board spent a lot of time looking through these. Our staff spent hours upon hours, if not weeks upon weeks, looking at all the different things from across the country in regard to coming up with what we think is the safest way to get our kids back into activities, understanding that physical growth and development is important, but also the mental and emotional wellness. That's really becoming a big issue, and a lot of studies are out there throughout the country about what happened during the spring when all the schools could not have activities during that particular time. So we have a tiered structure looking forward to things that could happen, hopefully don't, but we're ready with plans, and we're going to start now actually on the scheduled dates with practices and contests. And then we have a lot of very specific requirements. One for football, volleyball, and soccer that's important is no multi-team events. We're trying to limit the chance for transmission in those type of activities, and then other restrictions when we do have cross-country golf, those kind of things. So without having to go through everyone in detail, I just want to thank our staff for all their work. I want to thank our board for going through and helping to adjust and tweak to get the best possible plans out there, but also thank all the agencies that worked with us in collaboration, and thank the OPI and Superintendent Dylan for reaching out to us yesterday to go through these. So that's where we are. If you have any questions at all, just contact me or any of our staff members that are responsible for those particular sports or activities, and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions.
Thank you, Mark. And I also want to thank Superintendent Reisig. Mark and the superintendent gave us a good overview yesterday of the plans. I don't see Doug's name up here, but Doug, is that you on the phone? I don't know who that phone number is, but anyways, are there any questions or comments for Mark? All right, well, we appreciate you getting that guidance out. Very helpful. We did put that up on our website yesterday and actually included that link formally in the appendix of our reopening schools guidance, and got that re-uploaded with that update up to our website. So with that, I don't have anything else on the agenda. We've ran a little bit over. Superintendent Arnson, do you have anything else to add?
Thank you, Dylan, and thank you all for being on this call. I'm looking forward to, I do believe, Pete, if you're still there, we've got that subcommittee discussion on, I do believe it's licensing that's going to take place August 4th. So looking forward to that in a very public domain. So with that, thank you all. And Pete, if you have anything else to say, or anyone that is here, wish you all the best. Thank you. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, everyone. Next week, our meeting on next Tuesday is going to be at a different time. Christy will send out the information. We'll be meeting at 12:15 instead of 10:30, and that's to accommodate a presentation by the Montana Academy of Pediatrics. They've got some really good information on youth health as it relates to COVID. So Christy will send out that information, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.